Welcome today to the Einstein Retirement 360 podcast. Thanks so much for joining us. Today we're going to be, let me first introduce Kyle McCauley, my co-host, and today we're going to be talking about something that we've got a lot of questions about over several years, Kyle. When you call Social Security, are they pushing you maybe to take Social Security early or to step up when you get your Social Security actual income? It's a big question. There's some reasons that we're talking about it today. We're going to dig deep. As in all retirement, Einstein Retirement 360 podcasts, we're trying to dig deep and go into the deeper areas of the questions that surround retirement. This is certainly one of those, and we want to take some definite interest in this. I'm going to start the conversation before I get Kyle and let him comment. I had an experience today, Kyle. As you know, I'm got a pretty big birthday coming up. I turned 65 in just a week, and I called today to schedule and set up my Medicare. And in a Medicare call where I made it very clear, that I didn't want to take my actual benefit. I'm planning on postponing that till I'm 70. I think that's in my wife's best interest. It's in our family's best interest. That's our plan. But I spent probably a half hour getting prodded and asked questions about what I'm doing and what I can do, and telling me the options of taking it early, and even so much as, if I file today, I could actually get a big chunk of money if I go back 6 months, and let me tell you and explain all these different things. And I repeatedly told the administrator that I didn't want to do that. It wasn't, I told her this isn't the right thing to do for me. It's a bad decision. But she kept pushing. And I'm wondering, what are your thoughts? Is this just the tact that Social Security is in these days to try and push selection of of baby boomers' benefits maybe early? And is there a reason for that?
Before we go into answering the question real quick, always important to remember that with any of our podcasts or episodes, this is not designed to be considered specific investment, tax, in this case, certainly financial advice about your specific Social Security benefits. Should you feel that you need to make those types of decisions, or you hear something today that makes you want to take some action, please, as always, consult with the appropriate investment, tax, or legal professional before taking any action. Now, to answer your question, Dave, I don't necessarily have an answer. It would require me to sort of get into the minds of the Social Security staff, and maybe its administrators and those who are sort of coaching. But I will say that it has been pretty consistent that we are getting feedback from clients of ours where they're going in with an idea where we've actually consulted them about their specific financial situation and their specific, needs pertaining exactly to Social Security, and the person on the other line, the staff member who's assisting them with their filing decision and getting these benefits going, it seems to be going out of their way to say, well, here's this option and here's that option, here's this and if you do it like this is another thing. And it can be very confusing because although it's things that we've talked about, I often will be asked by a client of mine who's maybe a little nervous about having a phone call with Social Security. This most often happens with widows because widows have the most options in terms of how they can file. Sure. And they don't have a spouse there with them to, check their SICs, make sure that they're doing everything the best way. And so, in the way that they had planned to do it. And so they go in, and Social Security, the staff person, appears to be actually giving them advice that might conflict with the things that we've talked about. And so, yes, it can be very confusing for people, and it does appear that they must be being trained to do this because it's very consistent now. Social Security for a long time had a policy that they were prohibited from giving advice. I mean, technically, I guess you could call what they're doing educating or education
or something, yeah.
But I don't know. Based on what you told me,
definitely is slanted.
Yeah, it didn't sound like they were just giving you information and having no opinion.
No, they definitely. this is such a vulnerable time for people. Our clients, we go through a very elaborate, dedicated software process to determine what's the best financial decision in making a choice about when they file their Social Security. It's an important choice. But this is more of I think people, when they get to this point, we've seen this over the years, people are very vulnerable. There's something about wanting to get this settled that's very appealing.
Well, and wanting to make sure they don't miss out on something.
Yeah.
I mean, Social Security law is super complicated.
It's super complicated.
And so, there's always this thing in the back of your mind that says, am I really doing it exactly the best way for me? I will say that a lot of the changes of late to Social Security have simplified it, so you're less likely to, we'll call it, miss out on some benefits, but it's certainly not a simple thing. One of the things that surprised me about what the gal you were on the phone with, that she did, was that it sounded like she kept encouraging you.
She absolutely did, yeah.
Do you remember exactly how she was saying, you should file right now?
Yeah.
She said you should file. I mean, I think you're still working. Last time I checked.
Yeah. Well, she went into this. Now, this is after I told her that I don't want to do this. That I know it's in my best interest to wait. What I didn't say is I'd done an analysis to determine that. I told her I knew. And she went into this thing about, next year, you could earn up to this much money, and we won't take any of the Social Security back. And so you could easily, you could file, and you'd be okay. And the next year, there would be nothing that we would take back. So, at that, just like I told her, I'm going to file at 70. So she's telling me what my 66 benefit would be, what my 67 benefit, anything except telling me what my 70 benefit was, which I've already decided to wait and take. And what's disturbing about the whole thing, at one point I sort of jokingly said to her, well, I don't know. She said, well, you want to get some of this money back? And I said, yeah, I doubt I'll get all the money I put into this back. And she said, I was stunned by this at the time, and then I brought it up to you. Oh, most Social Security recipients receive all the money they put in back within 5 years. And I almost froze when she said that.
Do you want me to break it down?
Yeah, please. Because I didn't do the numbers, but it didn't make sense to me.
Well, the word most is what's thrown around. Okay, so it's the word most that.
Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about now.
Because with Social Security, there's these things called bend points.
Yeah.
The higher your income, and you've tended to have higher income over the course of your life, the higher your income, the lower percentage of Social Security, because Social Security is meant to be kind of an income replacement.
Yeah.
For lower wage earners, it replaces a much higher percentage of their working income.
Okay.
If you're a higher wage earner, it doesn't replace nearly as much because of how the bend points work. You get 90% of the first $900 some dollars. I don't have them memorized, but then 32% of the next whatever amount, like 1,000 or something, maybe less than that, and then 15% of anything above that.
So those 90%. There's a huge amount of people in that too.
Yeah, well, and there's more people in that where they have a decent chunk in the 20%,
right,
or 32%. But even that, you have to have a lot of your income in the 32% for it to really not work out in terms of that 5 year. So the word most is what's throwing that off.
Gotcha.
But that's because higher wage earners typically are not going to get their money back in 5 years.
Well, you had asked the other question, what else did she say? Yeah. She actually said, well, you're going to be 65. You'll probably I'm sure you want to think about being able to not work anymore. And I thought to myself, what is she? Now she doesn't know that I own with this company. She doesn't know that. And she doesn't know that I enjoy doing what I'm doing. And there's no this isn't really work to me, just like it's not work to you. We love what we're doing. But the encouragement there was, live a little. Take your Social Security and you can live a little. And I was like, what? I think that was the point I went, what is going on here?
Yeah.
It's just there's such a push that she's actually sort of selling me. Here's an employee of the Social Security Administration sort of selling me on go ahead, take it early.
And it feels, I get why you're skeptical, because it does feel a little conspiratorial.
It does.
Because in your specific situation, and you and I have talked about this, it is like a no-brainer for you to wait till 70. You know, your wife hasn't worked as much over the course of her life,
Right.
so her benefit's much smaller. It actually almost doesn't really matter when she takes hers.
Right.
It's almost inconsequential. But your benefit is the one that is going to last as the survivor benefit. And so it's kind of like not even really a question as to whether or not you should wait till 70. I mean, there's lots of arguments, right? You could come up with all kinds of different scenarios for why one way is better than the other. But the reality is for you, it's a risk management decision for you and your wife. And it's not a real question. It's like, okay, if I'm going to do some risk management for my wife, who last time I checked, you loved and cared about deeply.
45 years, 2 months ago. So yeah.
Right. So it's not really, it's like an obvious decision.
Yeah.
So for you, and you're having Social Security like push you to do something that you absolutely know for sure is not in your best interest, it can come across a little conspiratorial. Like, why exactly do they want me to take this benefit early?
Well, I mean, maybe there's a scenario where Beth and I, Beth is my wife, that we die at 77 in a car crash together. Maybe it would have made more sense, but probably not.
Yeah.
You know, there's maybe a tiny scenario, but in any kind of planning, it just wouldn't make sense for us.
Yeah, and that would include, I take all the money and I invest it.
Correct.
You know,
correct.
Scenarios.
If I don't do any of that, there's no way it makes sense.
Yeah.
And it's sort of crazy. Plus the idea that she was actually pushing me next year to, don't worry. Well, if you keep your income under, I think it was 52,000, you know the number, what it is, then I wouldn't, they wouldn't start taking Social Security back. And so I wouldn't have to worry about that. And I'm like, they won't take any back if I don't take it. It's just not necessary. But I mean, is there? There's a part of me that thought, and I'd love your opinion on this, your take on it. Maybe I am going the way of this conspiracy theory, but I started to think maybe one of the ways that they're trying to, help bolster the system is to get people to take it early, because it does save them money if people live a reasonable amount of time.
Yeah. There is certainly that idea, right? That someone in the higher ups, the actuarial side of Social Security, the people who are doing the calculations as to when does the system run out of money, they're already selling the treasury bonds that they were buying for years, to pay out current recipients. There is that scenario hypothetically that someone up in that upper echelon floated the idea that, maybe we should, when people call in for Medicare, because that's what, you were not calling in about Social Security, you were calling about
strictly
Medicare,
about Medicare,
which I'd love for you to share for a minute, because your circumstance is unique. We get a lot of questions. Should I file for Medicare even though I'm still working? Because you didn't have to.
No.
So it'd be good, maybe, I know we have some business owners that listen, and it'd be good for them to maybe hear why, in your case, that was a decision worth making.
Yeah.
Okay,
so
I'd love you to talk about that.
Sure.
But in terms of in terms of Social Security then pushing it, it is certainly possible that someone, actuarially floated down the idea that when people are calling in or making appointments about Medicare, that they should really, focus on educating them. I'm sure they said it, the best way. Focus on educating people about their Social Security when they call in about Medicare. And so in that process, in that discussion, I'm convinced, based on your description and based on what I've seen personally in calling into Social Security with clients, that people are persuaded to change their minds and file for benefits early. And maybe that is an actuarial decision, because I guarantee you they know how many people are still eligible for benefits who are past full retirement age who haven't filed yet. And I'm certain that number those 8% guaranteed increases is turning into this sizable behemoth of a number for all these people potentially waiting until 70.
Yeah.
And it may be something they're concerned about.
That makes a lot of sense.
So, conspiratorial, I don't know. We can't read their minds, obviously. But I could see a scenario where it works its way down, where somebody up top said, hey, maybe we should just teach people. Oh, what a wonderful thing. We should teach people.
Well, that doesn't cost us anything.
Well, and just imagine this. You're a Social Security person.
Right.
You're used to just kind of taking orders. Oh, let me sign you up. Great, no problem. And then you take a minute, because you've been taught to, hey, let me tell you about something with Social Security. I don't know if you knew this, but you can actually be working past your full retirement age and collect Social Security at the same time. How many of our clients, how many people who maybe haven't attended like a workshop of ours or something like that go, really?
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to happen a lot. And they're going to go, oh my gosh, I didn't know. And now you as the Social Security professional who's used to getting this positive feedback like, oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I definitely will call back. Now all of a sudden you're getting this validation that, oh, I should encourage people to do this. So she runs into someone like you,
Yeah.
who knows what's actually best for you,
Yeah.
and they say, hey, you should consider this, and you go, thanks but no thanks, and she's a little thrown off by that. So that could be the other
Well,
issue.
let me tell you the other thing that she was completely silent on. I didn't ask about it, but she didn't even bring up the fact that if I continue to work and take Social Security, there are tax issues. Which I know I find this all the time when we're talking with people that have come to us through our workshops and things. Many of them say that was like an epiphany to them, that they never got. I just had a conversation with somebody earlier today.
Sorry, Dave just lost his
I just lost
mic.
my mic, but I'll get it back in one
So
second.
you just had a conversation with someone earlier today.
Yeah, I just had a conversation with somebody earlier today that said they should teach people in high school about Social Security. And I thought about it, and he's right.
Yeah.
Because he said he's lived his whole life, he's never thought twice about this. He started a savings account because the bank said, oh, you should open a savings account. He started a 401k because the employer said, oh, you should start a 401k. Nobody's ever talked to him about retirement.
Mm-hmm.
He lucked into a small pension, sort of the last guy that worked for a hospital that actually got it, and then they cut it off.
Right.
And he's grateful for it, but it's, nobody's done any planning.
Sure.
And when he saw your workshop and it talked about taxes on Social Security, it was like, what? No. Yeah. And he was like, oh my gosh, I have no idea what I'm doing right now. But she didn't even mention that there could be tax consequences to me, which there absolutely would be.
Yeah, well, at one time, and I think I said this a minute ago, Social Security was prohibited from giving advice. So, it's a big shift for them to now transition into this educating, because educating, and at least in what I've seen, and now this story for you, educating certainly comes across many times like advice. Sounds like advice.
Yeah.
And there are more factors going on with benefits than just how much should you take and when. It's also, and then the hypothetical longevity. As though, I always like to think about it like this. When you used to go to a carnival, or like, I remember...
Oh, the guy that would guess your weight or guess your age? Yeah.
I remember the guy, I went to Michigan Adventure as a kid, which is like a subsidiary of Six Flags. And we went, and my first roller coaster ever was there. You go upside down. I thought it was super cool as this, 10-year-old kid or whatever. And, and I walked past this thing, and there's this guy guessing people's weight. And I thought, what is this? But I stood there and watched for a little while, and he was pretty good. He could guess people's weights pretty well. But I always remember that when I think about people, making a Social Security decision based on their longevity. Because it's sort of like, you don't really know.
No.
You might be good at guessing, but you might not. You might be the person that carries your weight a little funny and makes it hard for that guy to guess what your weight's going to be. But,
there are a lot of suppositions that we have to make to do retirement planning. how old you're going to live, how old your spouse is going to live, whether or not you might make it into a nursing home, whether you might not, whether there's all these questions. What am I going to spend? What am I going to spend 10 years from now? That, am I going to travel? Am I not going to? Do I have extra? Do I not? Those things we don't. What I've noticed is that most people don't really think them through until they're ready to jump off the cliff, and it's absolutely. And some people don't think them through until they've jumped off the cliff, and that's such a different conversation. A couple years in, you could have made some serious mistakes.
What I will say is that the people who don't think about it before they jump in, oftentimes they're under living.
Yeah, that's so true.
You know what I mean?
Talk about that, because that is so true.
I mean, just to put it simply, they could maybe be spending $6,000-$7,000 a month, really having a great time, or at their base living, they're living at $4,000 a month, and take a couple of really nice trips. They keep dreaming about this vacation property because they live in Pennsylvania or Michigan, where we are, or New Jersey, or someplace like that. And they look down at Florida and go, that would be awfully nice right now, about mid-January, mid-February. And they could absolutely afford to do it, but because they've never done the planning, they're under-living their retirement because they just don't have the confidence to be able to spend the dollars that they've saved. They've saved the dollars. They did the stuff to build the accounts, to accumulate the benefits, the pensions, the Social Security, and they could absolutely be doing some of these things, but they just don't.
It's so sad when I see somebody that's doing that. They've got plenty of money, but that first few years of retirement, they've made a pact of, let's just see how this goes. We haven't had a paycheck, and we're not going to get one. Let's just see how it goes. What are we really spending? And then a couple of years goes by, and maybe the market goes down a little. And then they pull back and go, well, let's wait for the market to recover. And you might lose 5, 6, 7 years. And those are what I call prime delivery years. Those are the years, if you're going to enjoy your money, you should do it early. First of all, there's no guarantee that you're going to be able to do it late. But secondly, all of us are condemned to a point where when age starts to set in, we just can't do what we used to do. And when you retire at 65, you still can do you can do all the stuff you did at 55 for the most part. You might have a couple creaks more than you did back then, but you'll get through it, and you'll love it. But at 75, it's harder. Yeah, it gets harder. So that planning makes such a big difference for people. It's knowing that they have a plan and the comfortableness that the plan is good that allows them to enjoy the money that they've saved. And not that giving it to the kids isn't wonderful, but I can't tell you how many people don't want to really do that. But they're on a course to do it. They're on a course to give a huge amount of their wealth away because they're not really figuring out
or worse, they don't incorporate some serious tax planning.
Yeah.
And they're on a course to maybe have their single biggest beneficiary be Uncle Sam.
Yeah.
Especially if we do things like revert on the estate tax. We go back to the old tax code. On the old tax code and with the estate tax levels where they were,
crazy.
We were very concerned about our clients who would leave a large estate behind. And now with the new tax code, less concerned, but it's set to revert in 2026. Correct. It's not like we can be that excited.
Correct.
We're enjoying these few years here where we have a little tax relief.
But nobody retired today is thinking they're going to die before 2026. I hope not.
Yeah,
I hope not. But I say this a lot. It's not about how much money you have. It's about how much you can spend.
Sure.
That's really the tax issue. You don't own all that money. Uncle Sam's your partner in those accounts.
Yeah. Yeah. It's I used to tell this story in the tax workshop that we do, and I stopped telling it so much, but it was such a. I would always notice there'd be a few people in the audience who I'd watch their eyebrows go up, because one of my clients he's always been a guy who's gone for the raises. Right? He's always trying to get his income higher. He's just been that guy that really went after it, worked hard, worked his butt off, really try to push his income up, get that next level, get that next promotion. And when I was doing retirement planning with him, in his mind, he was still in that mode of, I want my income to be good. I'm targeting. It took me so long to get him to say, how much do you want to spend? Not what do you want your income? I don't care what you want your income to be. How much do you want to spend? Let me figure out what your income needs to be to get to your spending goal.
Yeah.
Because, and then finally, after it was all said and done, I said, okay, look, we can do it your way. And you can have $250,000 of income. But you're only going to be able to spend, I think it was like $15,000 a month. Or we can do it my way, and we can have about $210,000 of income, and you'll still get your $15,000 a month.
Yeah.
That's the difference. And it was at that moment where he said, oh, yeah, it's not really about what my income is. It's not what I put on my tax form at the end of the year. It's how much money do I get to put in my pocket.
Right.
Which, sounds like an obvious thing. But for some people, it's not so obvious because you have always been someone who's pursued that next promotion, that next level of income. I mean, I know you don't want to brag about it, but you've kind of been that guy over your life where
absolutely.
You've always had, pursued the higher levels in companies and had great incomes over the course of your working years. And so I think you can kind of emphasize with that mind or empathize.
Yeah, I totally
mindset.
get it. It's a mindset that it's in some ways it's a trap. You're just
right.
suck yourself into it, and it's about income. But income today doesn't help me 10 years from now unless that converts to something that's
you can put in your pocket.
it's the only way. I want to come back to this question about Medicare, but before I do, I just keep thinking because last year we saw so many people. I don't want to say forced into retirement, but retirement decisions to retire, just more than we had ever seen in our careers.
Yeah.
And then I thought it would stop.
The thing that I would say coupled with that, so like side by side, because it kind of looked like forced into retirement, but it wasn't quite that.
It wasn't quite that.
It was people wanting to make sure they had control.
That is true. It's happening still this year, though.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah.
And I thought it would slow down at this point, but it doesn't seem to have. But I still see people when they're thinking about making that decision to stop work.
Yeah.
And it almost automatically coupled with that is, I'll take my Social Security. That's not always the best call, though, is it?
Yeah, well, again, taxes is going to be the biggest thing that blows that up. And by blows it up, I mean, it might be fine to take Social Security right away, but there's going to be a strategy that ultimately, even both short-term, but especially thinking long-term, is just going to make so much more difference, positive difference, especially when you start considering tax planning, by delaying Social Security. Because Social Security actually is tax advantageous so long as you properly manage the other types of income that you're generating once you have your benefits.
Right.
So doing things early on in retirement, for example, to say do Roth conversions, transitioning investment accounts to make sure that you're getting, say, municipal bond interest income or qualified dividends versus other types of income that are less tax advantageous, doing that work early on in retirement to make sure that once you're filing for Social Security, maybe you can take advantage of some of those tax savings that Social Security can offer. Now, for some people, it doesn't quite work out. Probably the biggest group that is having the most difficulty with that would be people with very large pensions. But that's going away rapidly. I think we're seeing fewer and fewer people
every year,
who are
fewer and
coming
fewer,
in with pension benefits.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. All right, let's. And what I hear you saying, and I think I fully agree, is it's not a no-brainer to just take your Social Security.
Yeah, for sure.
If you're retiring, it's absolutely should be a calculated decision that's inside of a plan that you've researched and you've done a good job on. And I know there aren't a lot.
Let me say something about that, because it would be easy to say, well, okay, so I hear what they're saying about delaying Social Security. So I'll do that. Okay, I get that. And I'll do some Roth conversions. And it's probably a great idea, but let me tell you, that idea is half-baked.
Mm.
What I mean by that is if you can't know after you get done with doing these Roth conversions and when you file your benefit at a later date, if you can't see side by side, if I do this, this is how my income and my taxes change for the better, then your idea is just the idea. You're still only in the idea. You still have only taken the idea and decided that it's good without actually seeing if it works in your specific situation.
And everybody's different.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly going to be groups of people that kind of seem similar, but yes, everyone's own individual circumstance is going to throw things just a little bit off.
Gotcha.
I mean, here's a good example. 2 clients come to mind for me. One very similar to the other, except the one client has a fair amount of real estate that they're generating rental income from. Rental income, from a tax perspective, is basically like a pension. Okay, it's 100% taxable, ordinary income. They have so much in capital gains on those rental properties that it just doesn't really make sense to sell them. And they would like to leave a nice estate to their kids, and so they're probably going to keep it to get the step up in cost basis, so their kids can get that real estate with no taxes. So, except for stop generating income, that person has a different planning scenario than the same person with about the same amount of assets, actually has about the same amount of net worth in real estate, but their real estate is vacation properties that they're not renting and never have and never will. Okay, so their real estate is for them. The other person's real estate, their homes, they're not in vacation destinations, so they're going to continue to use that to generate rental income. Totally different scenario, even though on the face, just on a net worth sheet, it's almost identical.
Yeah. You've got to, and I encourage you, you don't have to, we don't have to be your advisors, but you should make sure that your advisors are addressing these things. I think so many people come to us and they say, oh, my guy doesn't talk about taxes, he doesn't talk about Social Security.
Or he does in the way that I said.
Correct.
Where you just, that's where I'm saying half-baked.
Yeah.
You've got the idea, it sounds good, you start to take action and execute, but you never evaluated if at the end, that was actually creating a better outcome.
Correct. And that's the only thing that really matters. How it is overall, if it doesn't affect you, is a bad idea. Right. You got to do what's best for you in your circumstance, and it could be totally different, totally counterintuitive to the idea that, oh, hey, this makes sense, but it doesn't in your circumstance.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's take a minute and go back to this question about Medicare.
Yeah, it's not something that we talk about a ton. It's a fairly simple program.
It's a very simple thing. But there are some things that make you that are decision makers. Now, I own a business, and so I'm paying for healthcare. So my employer isn't paying for that. I am the employer, so I'm paying for that. About $900 a month. So for a single program, my wife is already on Medicare. She's a few years older than I am. And she pays nothing. So we opted, did a lot of research and opted to get an Advantage plan. I hear so many people afraid of those, but I will tell you, we've had about 3 years experience with an Advantage plan on my wife, and we love it. She pays nothing when she goes to the doctor. She pays almost always nothing for a prescription, and when she does say something, it's $4, which is to me nothing. And she has her choice of doctors. When she had a doctor that she wanted to get on, we called we use WellCare, which is a national firm, and we called them. And a month and a half later, the doctor was on WellCare, and she was able to use them. So it was no big deal. It was just it is structured. So it's not a PPO. It's more like an HMO. You've got a physician that you've got to go to. That's your main physician, which we do. If I need a referral, he refers me. Now, somebody said to me, well, what if you go out of state? I said, well, if I move out of state, I'll change plans. If I'm traveling out of state, I'm not going to go see a doctor for a checkup. I'm going to go to the hospital, and it's fully covered. So any emergency thing, any surgery I needed in California when I was there is covered just like it was in Michigan. But it's not a place that I'm going to go see a family doctor and say, hey, let's do some blood work. That's going to be treated like it's out of plan. Because I'm an idiot if I did that. So, and I can't imagine doing that. Now, there is a problem if you live in Florida and you live in Michigan, or you're in Massachusetts and you live in Florida. Maybe you've got to deal with that, and you want to check your plan out to make sure that it's available in both states and that you can do that. But any qualified Medicare salesperson can walk you through the options there. But for us, with the Advantage plan, ask me how much I pay.
How much do you pay?
Nothing.
Oh, that's good.
So that I pay.
Last time I checked, nothing's a good deal.
Yeah, well, I pay $148.50 for Part B. I don't pay anything for Part A. I pay nothing for the Advantage plan. That's my entire cost. Period. Now I'm paying $900 a month for a plan. That's cheaper than that. So it was a no-brainer for me.
I know a couple of things about you that makes me think that you pay a little more than what you said for the Part B, but maybe not.
No.
Okay.
No, that's what it is.
Makes me wonder.
Yeah. I'm gonna pay. I am. My income is higher, and I'm gonna pay. I'm gonna pay a higher amount for Part B than the standard, but I'll figure that out when it happens. But it's still cheaper. There's no way it's not less money, and honestly, the copays alone would make it better for me. I have some medicines that are a little bit costly. This gets those out of the way. It stops that problem. I can tell my wife I signed up for the same program she did, and she can stop worrying about it, which is actually a pretty good consideration, because she's, my wife is getting a little older. In her day, she was really good at this, but managing two different healthcare systems for her.
Is she going to watch this?
I hope not. It's getting a little out of hand for her. She would be easier for her to have one. So that contributed maybe a very small amount to this. But because and you know this about me, I'm just too busy doing other things. I can't manage that. She tells me what to do. I get a card in my pocket, and she'll schedule if I need a doctor's visit or something. That's just the way it goes.
Yeah, so I think the takeaway here is if you're working for an employer who's covering your medical insurance, then that is a different decision than, now you're on an employer plan, obviously,
Correct.
But that's not the same thing as one of the owners that's out of your pocket too, basically. So for a business owner, it's a very different decision around Medicare than, say, for someone who's just an employee. And I say just an employee, an employee that has the employer paying for the benefits.
Correct.
And really, it sounds like for something like a Medicare Advantage plan, the cost change would be in the Part B costs.
Correct.
Because the Advantage plan, at least the one you have, and this is not my area of expertise, is Medicare. Although I know a thing or two about it, but it sounds like that would really only be the big difference for you.
This is one of those things when you're doing retirement planning along with Social Security, you've got to consider healthcare as a part of that plan too. And I see so many people, I'll figure that out. Mm-hmm. Well, you got to come up with a way to understand what you're going to do so you can provide for the cost for it too. Mm-hmm. And it can get out of hand for some people. Mm-hmm. If you don't pay attention for that, it can get you in trouble.
Right.
Yeah, it definitely can. And
it surprises people too. I know this is another one of those things. People are surprised about having to have taxes on Social Security. They're also often very surprised they have to pay for stuff on Medicare.
Yeah.
Like, didn't I pay for this? I thought I looked at my tax return every year and there's that Medicare line. Yeah. And if they were higher income or they saw that Medicare surtax, didn't I actually pay for this stuff already? Not quite.
Well, and the donut hole is about the size of the Grand Canyon. So you may want to pay really big attention to how you fill that because it's quite big. And it sounds like, your healthcare is taken care of when you get to that age. Not so much.
Right.
you got to deal with this, and it can be. You're right. It surprises people. I've seen people gasp when they figured it out.
Yeah.
It's way more than they realize. And some supplement policies are really expensive.
Yeah. Right.
I don't know if that has to do with. I guess I have never really thought about where you're at could affect that. But I've seen policies that cost way more than I thought they should cost.
Yeah, we do see people in retirement with the equivalent of an employer-paid
Healthcare
gold plan,
Yeah.
where they're paying $1,000 a month or more for their benefit. I mean, it can get
For a supplement.
Yeah. Sorry, and I mean as a couple, so $500 a month.
Yeah.
As a single and individual person.
But most people, if you ask them 5 years out of retirement, they got to set aside $1,000 a month for retirement for health care, they would never have guessed that. Most people think it's going to be 100 or 2.
Right.
And it can surprise you. That's why digging in and finding other alternatives to the cost can be really, really valuable. That's a cost that doesn't go away either.
Right.
And it almost certainly is going to go up. That's the other thing. Healthcare costs are just, the inflation on them is like crazy.
Yeah, well, we could maybe go into that some other episode. I don't think we have time for that today. But yeah, healthcare costs is one of those that doesn't necessarily make sense for the inflation to be high from a debt perspective. In a lot of our daily podcasts, which I know you've appeared on one of those.
Yeah.
The debt and money supply leads to inflation. So what's up with healthcare? There's not a lot going on there, except for the fact that healthcare is largely subsidized by employers. Employers also have access, in many cases, to debt as a form of financing. And that is an enticement to labor, is to have a great health insurance plan. And so the health insurance plan becomes something that you go for the gold standard, the best one. And so healthcare costs never really see the consumer. It's all negotiated between insurance companies and hospitals, and then you see inflation. But that was the short answer.
Any last thing that you want to comment on? It's probably time for us to wrap up, but any last comments about maybe Social Security that you think are pertinent to the conversation that we're having about what's going on there? Maybe some talk about, we really didn't dance around the subject of why maybe Social Security is concerned about getting people to take it early. Maybe that's too much for this conversation.
I would say that the biggest thing to do is when you call Social Security, go in with a plan. Not your plan from your neighbor and what they said, or your brother-in-law, or your sister, or your father, or someone who has experience with Social Security. Don't go in with that. Go in with a plan where you've actually had some reports run. I mean, there's free tools that are so-so. I know that for those that attend our workshop, we offer to do a Social Security analysis for them. When you call Social Security, you should know what your plan is when you call in, because they will bamboozle you into thinking about all kinds of different options that you've probably already ruled out for all kinds of logical reasons, but in the moment, it could be somewhat compelling and can send you for a tailspin. So if you're going to set an appointment to file for benefits or to file for Medicare, and where you're actually going to talk to a person, just be ready. Okay, be ready and have a specific plan. Filing for Social Security is pretty easy to do online for most people. Again, that's why I mentioned widows often, are who I'm working with. One, because they don't have that spouse sitting with them. Two, they want to make sure that someone's kind of hearing and making sure they're doing the right thing. But then three, they can't just file online. And filing for Social Security online is pretty straightforward. It's easy for most people and avoids the extra opinions.
It absolutely does. I just thought this over. They don't really have a fiduciary duty to the people they're talking to either, do they? Yeah. So
for some reason, that's really funny that you would even pose that question.
Well,
fiduciary duty.
I think it's
Why
really.
would Social Security?
I think it's really easy to
fiduciary
think it's
duty?
your government. They should be doing what's best for you, but it's just not the way it works.
No.
So obviously, having somebody who's a fiduciary, understand that a fiduciary's obligation to do what's in your best interest is limited to their ability too. So get somebody who really knows what they're talking about in these areas. It's very, very valuable to do. That being said, thank you for joining Einstein Retirement 360 today. Please, we encourage you to leave a comment. We will do these on a regular basis. So if you've got a subject you'd like us to tackle, it's 360. Anything concerning retirement, we'll be happy to tackle and dig into. Please leave your comments. That being said, have a wonderful day wherever you are in the country. Enjoy this and have a great retirement.